this, but I actually had hypnosis not to trade 24-hour markets because I felt for me, I had some personal things happen and I could feel that I was using trading as a vehicle to avoid certain things.
Sure.
And a financial astrology, yes, we can use it to trade. We can use it to short-term trade. People you'll see a lot are using, the sun and the moon or whatever, the sun. We don't use it really, the sun, unless it's an eclipse, but, using the moon to trade, or we can, there's all sorts of different ways. But sort of want to say financial astrology can be just also things like prepping yourself, about not buying, when we want to buy property, when we want to sell property, you might want to buy an asset overseas, and so you want to know when the time to change currencies. There's a lot you can do with it just beyond sitting and trading all day. So financial astrology can be quite a wide varied thing, and I think at the moment it's really coming best, and particularly for me, prepping ourselves for things like the housing market when we might be reaching a top in this sort of cycle, having ourselves prepped with knowing that this kind of massive correction was coming. A really good financial astrologer I know says chance comes to the prepared mind, and that's exactly what financial astrology is. So it doesn't just have to be used for trading. I'm just using this example, the price of Bitcoin one day or the next. There's a lot of different stuff we can do with it. So it's a really quite amazing tool. Warren Buffett says you can't time the market. Well, I'm going to disagree with that. I really do. And I actually do use his strategy. Coming in looking for undervalued assets and selling them at overvalue, but with time. So it really is just time, and it literally is like, you can use it like just putting another indicator on a chart for confirmation. Now, we always use technicals first. There's a real thing where we've got to be careful not have a bias for the astrology, and we add the astrology to, now, unless it's really big, powerful astrology, certainly like this big correction, but it's a really fine balance. We want to put it together. So, if you've got that skills of the trading, that will help a lot as well.
So in the practical sense, mentioning that you have technicals first and you're using the financial astrology as an additional indicator, could you share some of the financial assets you're talking about? So technicals first, and let's talk. I'd like to put a timeline on this. So you've been doing this for 10 plus years. Can we go back and talk about some of the events? Let's talk about some of the turning points in the market. Let's talk about some financial crises. I mean, we go back 10 years. We're talking about defaulting in the U.S. Sovereign debt crisis in the Eurozone. We have Brexit in 2016. We had COVID in 2020. We have essentially a tech deleveraging in 2022. So, I mean, how does financial astrology line up, technically and with financial astrology overlaid on top of that? Can you explain to the viewers out there how that kind of lines up with the current environment over the last, maybe decade of what you've been able to see?
Yeah, look, it takes quite a while to learn this stuff. So it's pretty impossible to be able to clock all this stuff in your first 1 to 2 years of, it takes actually, what we do is we're using a lot of statistical data over 30, 40 years that have been handed down to those before us. Obviously, you've got to be looking at a certain market. You've got to, so it almost goes with, it's really strange, but it does start with a bit of intuitive gut feeling, but like a science experiment. Or you might trade one particular market when it comes to the more technical stuff, if you've got gold, this, that, whatever. When it comes to the big macro stuff like world events, then you really are starting to look at a different set of astrology. So there really are all different sets of astrology depending on what you're looking at. So something to do with something like a COVID or the correction that we've just had is looking at this sort of bigger picture kind of stuff. But if you're doing an asset, you go really, so each asset has its own astrology and you go really specific to that. So you sort of have to have a certain, it's weird, like you do, it's all really different things. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but you can't use one for another, if that makes sense. So the astrology that I was looking at when I was looking at that correction, I absolutely like, and it happened to be that it did fit with the crypto stuff. But then if I was, say, wanting to look at gold or the US dollar, I then need to start, well, it's a bit like, it's like a big jigsaw. And sometimes I call it Cluedo. What we need to do is start looking for clues. And I'm a really big believer of we need to have real world things going on, or, eventually the facts come to then sort of add the astrology in. I don't know if that makes sense. So we're looking for things out there that start to match what we could be saying in the astrology. You can't just guess that everything might happen. We need to kind of back it up with some substance, if that makes sense, because otherwise you're going to start creating all these hypotheticals and then you get
Right.
sold on something that you think might happen. So that's really, really important as well.
Sure. So let's take an asset class, and you can pick, but let's say in the
Yep.
last the last 6 months, did you see the kind of inflation play this year to be pro energy, pro commodities, pro inflation assets, or did you see just kind of the tech bubble in a way of overvalued instruments, overvalued assets that were finally coming back for reversions? So you go like please pick an asset class and just kind of explain your thoughts going through,
Yeah.
maybe navigating that this year in the markets.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess as far as the indexes, and we were just having a quick discussion before, looking at the charts of the indexes when we had the support, your 200-day moving average support miles away from price, there was all this sort of big hot air gap, and looking and thinking what might happen that, because usually when these things come down and they come down, they sort of test their sort of longer term moving averages and stuff. Often it can come with a bit of a thud. So what you do is then you think, okay, that looks really unsustainable. What might be an event that causes, or time? We're actually looking at time, not so much the event, but when do we think it might happen? So I was really looking at that last year thinking, I'm not getting involved with this. And then we had certain astrology that's actually quite related to tech markets and stuff. And that would be what we call a sort of Saturn-Uranus square. And so when we saw these coming, and I actually started doing some astrology of like arc and Tesla. So I was like, oh, this looks, and so it was all just starting to match a little bit. So we did have specific tech astrology. Now the inflation is something called the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And I was actually looking at that as well. And again, we go through history, like, we don't sort of come out with these predictions without having something to back it up. And we say in financial astrology, something needs to have happened 3 times to be able to create a hypothesis. We never just take something once and go, oh, that's going to happen again. Like sometimes you don't have the benefit of 3 times because some of these planets take about 84 years to go around the solar system, but most of the time we are looking at history. Now what we had at the .com crash was the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction as well, and then we came along into this kind of crypto NFT irrational exuberance, and we were following the same astrology, and that's also quite an inflationary astrology and stuff as well, slightly a bit different, but we were starting to repeat a lot of stuff there. Now it's very hard to separate what is inflation, how it's going to react. And I sort of remember seeing that sort of what we call this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. I think, I don't know if we crash after, if we crash during, we crash before, that sort of stuff. You sort of have to just sit back but what as a financial astrologer, you just know not to get involved, or to maybe, we all know as traders, we want, while the party's in full swing, it's time to leave kind of thing. But when we go back to something like the .com bubble, we know that's a really extreme reaction on the downside. And for example, this Jupiter Neptune, there's always a hangover, always so we did know that there was going to be a pretty bad hangover after this, and it would be good it was feeling a little bit hot and people were getting a bit overexcited, and we kind of knew we were going to start repeating a little bit of the same. And there's a lot of other astrology as well. So we sort of had this tech astrology, we had this sort of rational exuberance astrology, we're coming into this inflationary astrology, we had oil, and for example, when this, some people go, might not make sense, but Neptune rules oil, and Jupiter we say expands what it touches, and you had the oil markets go up because we say we have these sort of ruling planets, and for example, Jupiter, when it goes into certain signs, supports certain sectors. Well, Jupiter in Pisces is oil and under the sea and up it went kind of thing, so we can look at certain assets, but we know when these planets change signs, that asset's going to kind of sour a little bit, I guess we would say. Something like Uranus in Taurus is the crypto stuff, and so what happens is as it goes along, and when it reaches halfway, it's a bit like an escalator. So the first half, you get this huge momentum, and right as it hit exactly halfway, the momentum just went like someone put a pin in. So we can use these really interesting planetary cycles to understand the greater picture of what's going on, and we can look at time and sort of start to think when that asset may start to either cool, or when it's sort of, we know what's causing the move, if that makes sense. I guess more on it, obviously traders and price and everything, but we know on a sort of astrological level why something is happening.
Sure.
Which helps a lot.
So can you help me understand the timeline? So I mean, you started out, day trading. Now you're I mean, does the timeline matter? Do you have financial astrology in short term? Is it medium term? Is it long term? And what type of horizon are you personally using? Where if you like something, are you looking to indefinitely invest, or are you looking for something like right now over the quarter, the next quarter, the next couple of quarters? I'm just curious on the timeline.
That makes sense. So I think the psychology of the markets has to match our financial astrology a little bit as well. Assets with good astrology will certainly go up, but I feel that, and it's a bull market and everything goes up, you're going to probably get a stronger move, I guess. And, I guess something I work with clients, what you might have got 1,000% in before, you may only see 200-300, because at some point, if things are overvalued, or you get your signals and stuff, in a market like this, it's more technical. You're going to get your traders coming going, okay. And I think everyone's gone into a bit of a, not fear, but people are going to probably start trading a little bit more now, whereas before, you could sort of buy something and hold it longer. Now, me personally, I used to do a lot of day trading. It's just that I don't want to stare at a screen anymore. I say I bought the t-shirt a little bit for that. I prefer swing trading, and I think what we have to do with astrology, we have to have a lot of patience, and I call it a bit like cooking a meal. We have to let it simmer and cook a little bit. Some of these planets move really slowly, and they have a job to do. I say they don't wear a watch. And the ones that move slow, they, this sort of momentum comes, and you just have to have a lot of patience with it, because sometimes and we want to come in early while it's all, well, this is the way I do it anyway, is sort of I put that sort of overvalued model into it. I use really low risk. I do not take a trade with astrology if the risk is to the upside. I kind of like an 80% reward, 20% at the max risk. Okay. And that actually then brings in our psychology into it, because astrology can only do so much. If you're coming into an asset that's already run up 500%, I mean, the planets, they've got so much of a job they can do. Whereas if we come into a really, an asset that's fairly quiet, you can sit, and that's how you can sit back and let it do the work. I also use a little bit of market psychology. I like to come in when it's quiet, and sometimes I'll just even get up for it because it's feeling like a bit hot, and I'm on to the next thing. I just get a bit bored. I've been doing this for a long time. I enjoy the Cluedo, finding something quiet no one's interested in, and everyone's like, they might even say how terrible it is, and you can see some really amazing astrology coming, and all of a sudden it's the best thing in the world, and you're like, I think it's time to move on and find another. So there's a lot of different ways we can do this, but for me, that's how, because I have no stress. Like I really, there's minimal stress. At the moment, of course, you have a few days, you're like, but I think that risk reward model is really important. So with any trading, I mean, if you don't trade with a risk reward model, you're not going to, everyone's different. Some people like it. It's just, it's that how your psychology is. I had a mentor on Wall Street, and he banged that into me. I can't change that even if I wanted to, because that is my trading psychology. And that's really important. You can't change that except with probably hypnotherapy is about the only thing you could do to change your trading psychology. So it's important to model, however, based on what you've been through, what your experiences are early trading, who you are, and your lifestyle, really, at the end of the day. I think having a life as well as the markets is I think you realize that after 10 years, that's the way to go, because that, you'll be able to do this for quite a long time. But yeah, the risk reward is quite a big deal to me, because that gives the best result.
Yeah, that's great. And also one of my favorite kind of truisms for the market is the markets will never love you back. So as much as you want to obsess over what the markets are doing, or putting your analysis and your thoughts behind it, it's like you can obsess over it. You can spend 24 hours a day now trading Forex and trading cryptos, but the reality is the markets don't care. If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong.
I mean,
Risk
this is a
profiles
little
make a
known
lot of
fact.
sense.
I've never shared this, but I actually had hypnosis not to trade 24-hour markets because I felt for me, I had some personal things happen and I could feel that I was using trading as a vehicle to avoid certain things and, you know, futures and all that. And and I have a lot of clients that I work with that and they're really unhappy trading. You know, futures for me are just like no, you know,
Sure.
and I was really sort of in that Wall Street and it was all really moving and I didn't want to do it anymore. And there was a really great Forex trader in Australia where I lived and I haven't touched it I only did to that day. People are like, you should trade crypto. I'm like, I actually can't. It's because I don't like it. Now I'm really, like, I call it Zen trade. I just really wanted to kind of change things up a little bit because I felt a weakness. All the astrology in the world doesn't change psychology, you know. So I've actually molded my trading even to that. You know, people work with performance coaches, trading coaches. I just identified a weakness that I felt I wanted to kind of fix a little bit. So, and in Australia, you know, you're trading at night and you're sitting there all night, up all night. So also the location had a lot to do with it as well. You know, trading in the US is very easy, but trust me, once you change time zones, it's you lose your life a lot. So
yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that speaks volumes for the types of traders that things that traders go through. It's like the fact that you can say that, identify it, but also have the self-awareness to make that change, you know, to just save yourself the stress and have the balance you're looking for.